This video is covering grassroots progressivism. The focus for this particular video will be on how people push through reform at the local or even state level during the progressive era. For today's lesson, the hope is that you'll understand the development of grassroots progressive movement and its effect on local and national level. You will also be working on summarizing documents and political cartoons and using them in a sentence, allowing you to practice your DBQ skills. And hopefully you will understand when you're able to write a thesis statement and contextualization using your knowledge of the time period. So, as I said, today's lecture is focused on grassroots progressivism with skills practice in your groups. So, the progressive movement, remember, brings off of the populist movement and exposing sort of the evils of the Gilded Age. And the people who did this are the reporters who Teddy Roosevelt called the muckrakers because they were raking up the muck. So you have Ida Tarbell, who announced Standard Oil. There are two Idas of this time period. I always remember tar oil. Then you have Lincoln Steffens, who exposed the corruption of the political machines. Jacob Riis, who exposed what life was like in the tenement houses, especially with poverty. One of his photographs is there at the bottom of the little boys. And Upton Sinclair, whose book, The Jungle, will actually inspire legislation around the meatpacking industry, but the reality is he was really trying to expose what the immigrant experience was like, focusing on family from Poland and the experiences that they had here. And then Ida B. Wells wrote her articles on lynching. She was on an anti-lynching crusade, and though we will see that Standard Oil will be broken up, the monopoly will be broken up, legislation will be passed to limit the effects of the political machines with things like the secret ballot. Jacob Riis and the tenement houses will be responded to with the Hull House, and we'll pass legislation around meatpacking. We will not see any legislation around lynching during this time. So when we look at our reform, remember that the gospel of wealth written by Carnegie was the idea that those with wealth should give back to society by bettering it through libraries and funding of arts and things like that. Well, we also had a movement during this time to try to better society through giving back to the poor, and that was typically a form of Christian charity. So you had the social gospel movement, where faith was a tool of social reform, where it was believed that by doing good works to the poor, that was your tool to salvation. So you have the Salvation Army, which was founded during this time to create things like soup kitchens and shelters. You have the YMCA, which was the Young Men's Christian Association, where young men in the cities would have a community center where they could go and have a place to stay and get a meal and sort of connect with other people within the community. The settlement houses were community centers for the immigrants. They were in immigrant communities, and they were places that would offer things like childcare and adult education classes and how to cook on a budget, which if you just moved to the United States, you might not know how to do that with the food that you were experiencing in this new market, things like that. And these were ways for people within this community to connect, but also to provide support to them. Emerging from the social gospel movement and the settlement houses was social work and sociology. Middle-class educated women were doing the work of providing for others, and by spending all this time in the tenements and through these reform movements, they actually started trying to help better the rest of society through education and reform. During this time period, we have the period of professions, the rise of professions. With the new middle class, there were efforts to try to regulate the professions and say that anyone who is part of that profession either has to be licensed or show qualifications. So, for example, the American Medical Association found in 1901 that to become a doctor, you have to show that you are have a certain number of classes, pass certain tests, and you're licensed. You also, to keep your license, have to have continuing education. Same with the Bar Association. You can't be a lawyer unless you pass certain tests and you show that you're qualified. And then for women, you have the helping professions. And I put quotes on helping because the idea is that this was for women because women naturally help others, but also that because there are women entering the workforce, the only acceptable position for a woman would be the ones where they're helping, like social work, nursing, or even telephone operators. Now, as women are becoming reformists and are entering into the professions, they're also going back to that era of Seneca Falls and 1848, wanting equal rights and the right to vote. And so you have the formation of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, or NAWSA, which was founded by Carrie Chapman Catt. And women are going to petition for the right to vote in three ways. They are going to picket and petition. They are going to do it at the local level. For example, in those Western states that are going to give the right to vote to women through local and state elections, and then also in petitioning for an amendment. Women will get the right to vote with the 19th Amendment in 1920. Now, there is a picture of a woman in a jail cell. That is from the women who were arrested and jailed in Lorton Prison, which is right near Lake Braddock. And so there is just an example of how women were willing to be arrested and were even tortured in the prison in order to secure the right to vote for other women. Alice Paul is, once women get the right to vote, she's going to say, not good enough. We need an equal rights amendment. She wanted to see that pass. She introduces it in 1921. It will finally be passed by Congress in the 1970s. However, it will never be ratified by the states, thus being the only amendment ever to be passed by Congress not to be ratified. Now, at the local level, we're going to start attacking the political machines. The first one is the secret ballot. This takes power away from the political machines because they cannot ask for someone to vote a certain way, and we're guaranteed to know exactly how they voted. So this takes the greatest power away from it, as that political cartoon demonstrates. Initiatives were where the people could actually write a law and send it to the local legislature to be passed. Referendums are where the local legislature could actually put a law on the ballot for people to vote on. And then recall is where you could have a special election before an elected official's term was up in order to have them voted out of office. Now, initiative, referendum, and recall are all at state and local levels. You can't recall the president. You can't recall your state or your senator to the U.S. Senate. This is only your governor or your school board members or things like that. Now in Virginia, we can't recall our governor because they only get one term, but you can still recall certain elected officials. Now the picture there is of Robert La Follette. He is going to be your first real progressive governor from Wisconsin, and he's going to push in some of these local reforms. African Americans are going to be petitioning for reform. This is just a continuation of the end of Reconstruction, and sort of in response to that, you have two leaders of the movement, Booker T. Washington, who believed that technical education is key. Now, he was a son of former slaves, and so he is recognizing that within his community, there are a number of people who still haven't gotten an education. They don't know how to read and write, and maybe they have basic level of education. And so he believed that the only way to advance the community was to develop skills that would be valuable to the white community, and thus advance the African American community. Du Bois, on the other hand, believed that higher education, a educated group, would lead the rest. Now, Du Bois had never really experienced segregation. He was actually the first African American to graduate with a PhD from Harvard. And so you could see that he had a little bit of intellectual superiority complex, where he believed that because of having a higher education, that others should want the same thing. He's going to form the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Their principal weapon is going to be the Supreme Court. They're going to get some minor court cases passed with some real small strides towards equal rights, but the major court cases won't come until after World War II. But the effort is there, and they really, by having that higher level of education, they can use the court system to their advantage. The other thing about the NAACP is the fact that it was African Americans along with progressive whites. So this wasn't an African American only community, and rather he recognized that you had to work in joint with whites in order to advance the community. Temperance, there is still the belief that alcohol leads to the consumption of alcohol leads to poverty and crime and abuse. And so women are going to continue to petition for that. And you have the Women's Christian Temperance Movement. They will secure the 18th Amendment pushed through by World War II, as well as by a moral movement. You already had some of that being passed in certain states, like you had your Maine laws and things like that, but now we have a nationwide amendment. We're going to be looking at the power of the 18th Amendment and its effectiveness when we get to the 1920s. Okay, at this point, you guys will be taking a break and you're going to be working on your progressivism group work. Now, real quick, only one person in the group is going to make a copy of the document that is on Schoology. You are going to share that document with your group members and with me. Then you are going to pick 2 documents and 1 political cartoon to read and analyze. They should be 1 document from the first 4, 1 document from the second 4, and then 1 of the political cartoons. Please pay attention to the names of the documents. You're going to summarize your document, and then you're going to decide how, based on the question that's at the top, how effective were progressive reformers, yada, 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 you are going to use your document in a sentence as if that was a document to use on your DBQ. Okay? So, once you guys have done that, you will then go and you will comment on your classmates' sentences, giving 1 glow, a good thing they did, and 1 grow, something you would suggest that would help them improve it. Okay? The idea is at the end, each group member should have summarized 3 times, written 3 sentences, and written 3 comments. Okay? And then, as a group, you're going to brainstorm a thesis statement and contextualization. This is due next Tuesday. On Monday. So you are going to have time next class to continue working on this. So you should get a good start today, but do not worry about getting it done by the end of today.